Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about something that everyone has been waiting for, and that is to better analyze the charts of President Donald Trump with contender Joe Biden. And what do I see up until this point? Oh my goodness, I cannot believe what I'm seeing, to be perfectly honest with you. This is going to be a hard call, but I'm believing it could not even be happening, because looking at where all the planets are going to be between now and Election Day in the United States and Inauguration Day, everything seems to change. So one thing I'll put out there right this moment is whoever we think is going to be president on Election Day probably won't be president by the time we get to Inauguration Day. Something radical will occur. Let me explain why I think something radical is about to occur. And first, the chart that I'm going to compare both of these individuals' charts to is the United States of America. So let's put up the chart for the USA and talk about this for just a moment. What is going to be happening here? It doesn't look like things are going to go smoothly, to say the least. So putting up the chart for the United States, this is the Kelleher chart, and it works very, very well. I believe in this chart. It is, of course, the birthday of the United States that we celebrate July 4th, 1776, for 6:30 p.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the Constitution was signed. And in this chart, you will note so many interesting things. The most interesting thing that I think is going to be occurring for the United States is the fact that transiting Mars is going to be in Pisces. It's in Pisces right now, but it's going to go back and forth out of Pisces into Aries. And when it does, it hits that 29-degree mark of a water sign. Now, you've heard me talk about Gandanta, and what Gandanta really essentially means is not something's wrong, something's not working. But I was always taught it was affiliated with the sense of drowning. And with drowning, that can be losing control or actually literal drowning. And as I've said before, people with Gandanta planets feel like either they've been out of control in those areas of their life, or they actually did have a literal drowning where they almost drown. So plugging in Mars, the day that I think is significant for Mars is the day that it's stationing, which is about a week after Election Day. Mars is going to be stationing. Well, first it's going to station to go retrograde September 9th at 4 degrees of Aries, and this is going to heat everything up in September. This is where it's all going to start. But then it is going to continue all the way back when it turns retrograde from 4 degrees Aries. So it shoots all the way to 4 degrees Aries, and then it stops on September 9th and turns retrograde, goes all the way back to 21 degrees of Pisces, which this will be November 14th. This is after the elections. And Mars represents energy, violence, anger, hostility, war. So I'm thinking there's going to be protest. And of course, the elections aren't going to go as we thought. Why? Because Mercury changes on that day. It stations to turn direct on the election day of November 3rd. The last time this happened was the 2000 elections with Gore and Bush. And Mercury did the same thing. On that day, it stationed to go direct. It wasn't going retrograde. It's just whenever Mercury stations and changes direction, so does everything in the world change directions. Remember, in 2000, we didn't know who the president was till finally it was sent to the Supreme Court, and it wasn't till December that we actually knew who the president was. this will happen again. I think there's going to be all sorts of voter fraud, right? That's going to be the number one thing, because probably with the coronavirus, people are having to mail in their vote, and there's so much liability for fraud in that. This is going to be a big mess. So first of all, I don't think we're going to know who the president is. Second of all, we may not even have the elections with what I'm seeing with Mars. And third of all, one of the candidates may not even run. We'll see if somebody doesn't pull out or has to pull out, maybe because of sickness or something else. We will see. So let's plug in Mars, the degree that it's going to station to turn direct, which is November 14th. This is where I see pandemonium pretty much, probably civil war almost. So Mars will be at 21 degrees of Pisces. Put it in this chart. What do you see happening there? Yes, it's all by itself in the 4th house, and it will be squaring the sun in the United States chart. Notice the sun there at 22 degrees of Gemini. Mars will be aspecting that. And also Mars will be opposing Saturn in this chart, which sits at 24 degrees of Virgo. And let me explain something. The sun represents the leader. It represents the king, the president in any mundane chart. Saturn is in the 10th house of the government, leadership, control, the head. Saturn being there, we're going to have exactly, almost exact, because Saturn's 24, Mars is 21, aspecting that Saturn, but squaring that sun. This is saying there's something about lost leadership, or that there's war about the leadership or who the king is. This is definite. So look at that, plus Mercury changing directions is huge for election day, November 3rd. Now, looking a little closer, Saturn on that day, now remember the transits aren't exactly in the chart, but I have them down below. Saturn's at 2 degrees of Capricorn. Now this is significant because it is sitting right there opposing Mercury in the United States chart in the 8th house. This deals with finances, money, big money, government money. The 8th house is other people's money. This is big. Saturn depresses things. But by the time, now during the elections, we have Jupiter around 27 degrees, somewhere around there, 27 degrees of Sagittarius. It's not helping Saturn out. Saturn's laying down on the planet that is in the 8th house. And Saturn's in the 2nd house of finances and money. This is all about finances and money at this time. Now, those are the most important variables that I want you to recognize. But going back to the times of calamity and hostility and breakout of anger all over, the time for this will be when Mars goes Gandanta at 29 degrees. Remember I said Mars in its retrograde motion is going to be going in and out of Pisces. It will be 29 degrees of Pisces. And remember, Gandanta planets are planets that are in the last 2 degrees of a water sign, right? So Mars will be 29 Pisces around August 4th through the 6th. Expect you'll see lots of storms and hurricanes and things break out. This is going to be where major floods start happening. And then October 5th through the 7th, more of the same, but starting in on a whole different host of events, I believe, concerning the elections. Then by December 22nd to the 25th, there will be anger, protest, hostility. Remember, you're going to say, I remember her saying that, because this is exactly what I foresee happening. And then don't forget the solar eclipse that's going to be happening on top of all of that. That's going to be happening December 14th at 28 degrees of Scorpio. And that is still a Gandanta degree. Remember, it's going to be at the tail end of the Scorpion. This is one of the most treacherous parts of the zodiac. In Scorpio, the very last degrees are called they're bad. the bad sting. The sting, the tail of the Scorpion, is in those last few degrees of water. So that is going to be where the eclipse falls at 28, 29 degrees. Now, the next chart I want to pull up so you can see how this all activates President Donald Trump's chart right here. Notice when you look to, he was born under a lunar eclipse, of course, where the sun is conjunct Rahu in his 10th house and the moon is conjunct Ketu in his 4th house. Now, the 10th house is the house of reputation, power, kingship, and you cannot deny, like him or not, the power of Rahu's sun in the 10th house. And yes, Uranus is there, so he is extraordinarily unpredictable in his behavior. But the sun rules the chart. His ascendant, which is in Maga, which is conjunct at 6 degrees of Leo, conjunct the fixed star Regulus of Kings. Another point I want to point out about the power of his chart is that he has Jupiter stationary direct on that day. Jupiter went from retrograde to direct on his birthday. That means Jupiter is all powerful. A planet that's stationed in a chart gives utmost power and is the most powerful planet in the chart. And I must say, with Jupiter being stationary in the 2nd house, he's done quite well financially. That's the power of that Jupiter. So what makes this even more powerful is the fact that he is in Jupiter's Mahadasha. And he went into the Jupiter Mahadasha less than a week after the last elections in 2016. So that's another reason why he won those elections. So aside from everything the media was saying, that was just like he was a joke. And somehow he came out of left field and won, to everyone's surprise, except me. But I'm going to say that Jupiter being stationary is all powerful, and he is in Jupiter Saturn Mahadasha right now. So Saturn is the problem. I will say that because his Saturn sits in the 12th house, and that does consider losses, all right? But that Sun Rahu, wow. And with Uranus, it's just like he got the presidency by a big surprise. That's Uranus energy. But let's go to his moon Ketu in the 4th house. Now, the 4th house, of course, represents our home, our family, and the transit of Ketu, which is this Ketu solar eclipse, December 14th, sits right on his moon Ketu. So here's essentially what's going on. Ketu is on his moon, and the moon rules the 12th house. This could be some kind of major loss. Maybe it is not for him. Maybe it's for his family. That is a 4th house matter. But let me remind you of something vitally, vitally important here. The 4th house, when we talk about a leader's chart, you must always think of it in terms of the country. What is happening to the country will be revealed in the leader's chart. This is an absolute. I've done this my whole life with astrology. So if the 4th house in mundane astrology represents the homeland, and we have Ketu sitting exactly the solar eclipse at 28 degrees of Scorpio, Gandanta on his moon in the 4th house, there's something vital that could be happening to the United States, and that's reflected through his chart. And maybe there won't be a presidential election with something this potent happening. That's one thing. That's my first prediction that I'll say. It could be martial law. Something's going on. Now, in the case that it could represent his personal life, there's something involving a woman that is going on that is disturbing and distressing and making great sadness and loss in his life. Someone in his family. There's something up. But for the country, this is serious. Okay, so going back to where I was pointing out, you know, that eclipse, there's something like maybe they say he's won and then they say he hasn't won. That would be a loss, right? But the fourth house is also in Vedic astrology considered the house that's called the seat of power. And the 10th house, Sun with Rahu, is all powerful. And don't forget, he's got a nodal return. And nodal returns, when Rahu returns to Rahu and Ketu returns to Ketu, it reminds us of our destiny. And it's powerful. And aside from that, it's conjoining the sun. And Rahu, which will be right there around 20, let's see here, around the degree of the eclipse, it's going to be right there. Rahu is, let's see, to be exact, I know that Rahu Ketu are at 20, oh, this is 20, it's around 24 degrees, I believe. So anyway, it's somewhere around 23, 24 degrees, Rahu and Ketu, but the eclipse is at 28. And transiting Rahu is actually in a trine to his natal Jupiter. And he's in Jupiter's Mahadasha, and if you look down to the third level, the Antara Dasha, he is in Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu. Rahu is aspecting his natal Jupiter from the 10th house, sitting on his sun. And remember, last time transiting Jupiter had just returned to his natal Jupiter, and Jupiter was trining his Rahu and his sun. So something similar is going on here, but a big turn of events. Another thing I want to point out is that Neptune will be at 26, 27 degrees. And Neptune squares the nodes almost exactly in the eclipse. It's at the midpoint. It's in the bends. Neptune represents deception, deceit, denial, secrets that will come out. So this is profound. And if you want to compare the chart between Trump and the United States, notice that Trump's Mercury is the United States Jupiter, and his natal Jupiter is the United States Saturn. That's pretty intense. And even his Venus sits on Mercury in the United States 8th house. So whenever someone's chart lines up with the United States chart, they have karma together. He has a destiny with the United States. So now let's pull up Joe Biden, which he is, and you know, it's probably a good idea that we double check with the vice president, whoever he is naming, which you know must be someone very powerful, because in his case at age 78, I don't foresee how he's going to work too well for the next 8 years. But he needs a powerful VP. But we don't know who that is yet. I often said if he chose Michelle Obama, he's got it in the bag. But she has declined. She says no way. But that would give a win. Because her chart, I checked it, was fabulous. So yes, she had the Jupiter-Saturn sitting on her exalted Mars, which I thought she would be the one. Maybe she'll change her mind. But can I remind everyone something right now before you start putting all these texts or messages about your political wants or needs or what you feel is right for the country? We all want the same thing. We want the good for this country. We want people to prosper, to do well. So all of us want the same thing. Please remember that when you put all your hate messages about what political candidate that you love or hate. It's not okay to put out that, because always remind yourself that we want the same thing. It's just our ideas of how to attain that are a little bit different. And who's to say who's wrong or right? And that kind of contention and that kind of hate is what's going to tear up everything. And let me say something else. These two candidates are going to tear each other up anyway. So there'll be so much dirt on the both of them. Who wants either of them at this point? So please try to be objective. Please, I'm trying to really do this analytically, looking at astrology. So putting up Joe Biden chart. I'm not too sure about his birth time, but I'm going to go with it just in case. But we have him born November 20th, 1942 at 8:30 a.m. Whenever it is on the half hour or the hour, I have suspicions. Furthermore, this birth data came from memory, not a birth certificate. So we know how memories can sometimes be, but let's go with it anyway. So looking at this gives him a Scorpio lagna, Scorpio ascendant, and his sun is in Scorpio. Now that means that Ketu is on his sun or approaching his sun. It's not as tightly conjunct as Trump's sun, but his sun being in Scorpio and Trump's is in Taurus. Trump has Rahu on his sun while Biden has Ketu on his sun. And don't think Ketu is the indicator of loss, yes. But don't forget Obama won with Ketu on his sun, but it was in his 7th house. And 2 days before he won the election, his grandmother died that raised him. How sad was that for him? Yes, there was a great loss. Just like I know that the Ketu on Trump's moon will bring a great loss. So you can see how we're up in the air with this. Now, Ketu, yes, will be around 26 degrees on election day. And then we also have his Jupiter, beautiful, exalted Jupiter, but it is retrograde, is in his, wow, look at that, his 9th house. So he has Jupiter exalted in the 9th house of truth. So he wants to find the truth, but it is retrograde. So that can mess things up a little bit. But notice also that I said that Saturn was going to be 2 degrees of Capricorn on election day, and Saturn exactly opposes his natal Jupiter. Saturn can cause setbacks and delays. And remember that Donald Trump has his Venus at 2 degrees of Cancer, where Saturn will be aspecting it. And if we talk about Trump, Venus rules his 10th house of his career. It's in the 12th house dealing with losses, foreign lands and countries, but Saturn is aspecting it. Okay, so that's not too good, but here is Biden with Saturn opposing his Jupiter. That's not good either. So then I was looking to the fact that this eclipse, Ketu being the first, puts Rahu in the 7th. And the 7th house is your opponent. And that could mean your opponent is extraordinarily strong with Rahu in the 7th. Remember, in Obama's chart, Ketu was on his sun in the 7th. 7th house is the opponent. Ketu, his opponent was weak. He won. So this is the opposite. Rahu is in his 7th, which could mean the opponent is strong, which could represent a win. So more than anything, if you look at Biden's dasha, he is in Jupiter Rahu. And when we look at Jupiter Rahu, that's pretty powerful. I mean, that's extremes, expansion, gains. And Rahu will be, now let me explain something else that I forgot. Mars will be in his 5th house on election day. That's actually quite good. The 5th and the 11th houses can deal with politics. And that will give him great strength. But when we go to Trump's chart, I forgot to point out something very, very important. The entire time that Mars is in Pisces, which it will be in Pisces around the time of the election, stationing, it will be in his 8th house, which could be very bad for health. because the 8th house is the house of major change, transformation, and endings. So transiting Mars, being in that 8th house for Trump, is scary. And it's aspecting Trump's Mercury. I mean, there was so much going on, and it will be aspecting Trump's Jupiter, because remember, Trump's Jupiter is the same degree as the United States Saturn. So, but looking at Joe Biden, going back to Joe Biden, you know, I'm looking at this election day, and another thing is, if we look from his moon as the ascendant, just in case this ascendant is off, then K2 is on his Venus. Well, it's in his 8th house, let me just say, from the moon, because his moon's in Aries, and with this eclipse of forming in Scorpio is in his 8th house. So this doesn't look as strong for him. And another thing I might add, he's going to go into Saturn's Mahadasha in 2 years, in the year of 2022. So whenever you're at the ending phase, Jupiter Rahu is the ending phase of a Mahadasha. He's going towards an end. And once he goes into Saturn, things will be very, very difficult for him. I don't even know if he's not going to pull out before the end, because this looks like a lot of losses to come. And so surmising all of this, it looks like we're in for one hell of a ride, and it doesn't look good. It looks frightening, and I'm just afraid something could happen to one of the candidates, and I also think that something could be happening in the country, so maybe there's not an election. But at this point, with both in the race, I'm going to say this. I think Trump's chart is stronger, like it or not. It's just the way I see it. So let's continue on, because I think there's going to be some changes. So let me just say, if things go smoothly, which they won't, it looks like Donald Trump could be reelected. I'll put it out there right now, but I might be redoing this as we see the tides change, because I know something is about to change. So with that, I'll close. And if you would like more information, don't send me any hate mail. Go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. And if you would like to sign up for my university, or you go to my university website so you can better understand and learn Vedic astrology from me. And my university website is universityofvedicastrology.com. Thank you.